Okay, now this is when we're going to put the Rebel X dash bracket on. That'll move your dash up and out of the way. Pre-production, I didn't get one, so I still have the stock dash on. But basically what you need to do is you need to disconnect your clutch cable from your lever, feed it back through the hole in the dash, just like it is on the stock one, and then reassemble it, and then it's just 2 bolts. It's 2 bolts that hold the bracket on the bottom of your triple tree, and it's 3 screws on rubber grommets that hold your dash in place. It's that simple. If I get it before I'm done with this video, I'll include it. If I don't, I won't. We've got the holes drilled, tapped, helicoils in. Now we're going to dry fit the frame clamp on to make sure that everything, number one, lines up, and to make sure that this little flathead bolt actually fits. The idea is when this goes in, it has to tighten down, okay? And what I found is I already did a quick dry fit. I found that I had to actually grind off about 2 or 3 threads off the end of this to make sure that this fit tight. And same thing with this bolt as well. So once we're sure that these bolts will actually tighten up, we're going to put the block together, which includes this little bracket, and come on over and we'll put this together. I'll explain a couple little things you're going to need to do in order to get this to work easy. Step 1, have a cup of coffee. So the frame clamp is basically 3 pieces. It's this big aluminum block, this little steel bracket, and then another bracket that goes on the back in those 2 holes like so. It points up, right, because it'll go on 4 different ways, but it points up. Keeping in mind that you're going to have the weight of your entire tower hanging off of these 2 bolts, right? So it's going to be pulling it down this way. And the leverage on this bolt's going to be off the hook. So because it's kind of it's a thin piece of steel, right? And if it just levered on this bolt, tilting it forward, I think this would probably fail eventually. So what they've done is they've added this bracket that's going to bolt to the cable guides on your frame, and that changes the leverage point to this bolt. And this bolt has this big gigantic block to keep it from breaking. Does that make sense? So even if it doesn't make sense, we're going to move on here. So we need to attach this bracket with your 2 screws. Now again, I had to drill and tap those holes myself. Mine was pre-production before they added that little feature. So you guys won't have to go through this, but you'll probably still have to put this together. So it gets a screw there, and it gets a screw there. You want these 2 bolts to be tight enough that the bracket doesn't move easily, but loose enough that it still has a little bit of play in it. Right, so that's too much. Much better. Okay. All right, now that that's all set up, let's go fit it on the bike, and ooh, we're almost to where we can put the tower on. Yay. Again, the part that sticks up goes up. I haven't torqued them down because I'm still going to need to take them off in order to tighten that back bracket down. But I need to make sure that the bolt holes on either side line up. Then we're going to pull this whole thing off, and then we're going to tighten those two bolts on the back down one at a time so it doesn't move, and we're going to Loctite those in place. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do the same thing. Make sure that they're lined up and actually put those bolts in first, and then put these bolts in with some Loctite, and then it should be good to go. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure that the bolt holes line up with this bracket, and you're going to use the original bolts that came off the bike. So there's the right side, and that lines up pretty good. Now I'm going to, because the torque is going to go this way, it's going to try to pull this up. I want to pull that bracket up a little bit, I think. Here's the bracket on the left side of the bike, and that actually looks pretty good too. This little loop is going to be for a zip tie to hold all this other stuff together. All right, now we're just going to pull the top one out. While I've got the permanent Loctite out, I'm going to add some permanent Loctite to the bolts that hold the steel bracket on the back on as well. And then the side bolts and the main bolts are going to get non-permanent, just in case I ever want to take the tower off again. I'm a little worried that because these threads because these bolts are so large and they're in a heel coil, that if you put permanent on this, you might pull the heel coil out too, and then you have to redo it. So we're going to go ahead and use some non-permanent on the bigger bolts, and then put everything back in, make sure it lines up, and then put the tower on. Now for the fun bit. We've got everything on the clamp torqued down and Loctited up. That should be good, and all we're going to do is slide the mount onto the clamp and then run these two bolts through. It's pretty simple. And there we go. So at this point, we can go ahead and put all the bolts for the tower on. We're going to put a little non-permanent Loctite on them, on the bolt side. You notice I have all the nuts are on this side, all the bolts are on that side, just to make it a little more consistent. And then the next thing we're going to do, and the part I'm kind of dreading, is we're going to rewire everything, put all the connectors back together and try to make it as neat as possible so that when you turn your forks lock to lock, nothing gets in the way. There may or may not be a lot of swearing. All right, let's at least get the nuts Loctited. I can do that without swearing, I think. Step one of your wiring is going to be deciding how you want to power everything. I told you before that there's a couple ways. I went straight to the battery. And this is my positive terminal that comes back, actually comes across. There's an inline fuse, 10 amp inline fuse, and then that comes up along the rail and comes out here. My negative terminal actually just comes off where the battery connects. I didn't run it all the way back to the battery because A, there's no need, and B, that just adds a whole bunch of crap back here. And I don't want crap back here, I want crap up there. So that's what I did. There is also this little guy right here. This is a accessory plug for your bike, and it's got its fuse back here in with all the other fuses. So there's a spot you can get voltage from, and then you're just going to run that up through. So whatever you want to do, you decide. Whatever you do, I said do, remember there's that little hole at the top of this bracket, and run everything there and cinch it down really good. I left the clutch cable a little loose so it can move. It's just run behind the wires. It's not holding on everything. The idea for wiring in general on this is going to be, as wires come front, you see I took the tower off so I could mess with this. The wires need to go up and underneath the dash where they were before. Okay, so everything comes in and goes up. That's where I'm at so far. So there's a reason Manuel didn't show you his wiring video, and that's because you have to stuff all of this underneath the dash so that when you turn the steering wheel, it clears the tower. Do you see what I'm saying? There is not enough room in Texas for all these wires to fit. And yet that's what you have to do. So what I'm dealing with is the fact that I don't have the relocation bracket that moves this up and gives you all this room under here to put things underneath. I have the regular bracket for the dash, and there's just no room. Honda was not doing you any favors when they added this many wires to your bike. But again, all this stuff, you think you can hide it in the tower, but you can't, because it all has to turn, or most of it has to actually turn with the forks. Oh, I've been swearing a lot. All right, I'm going to get back to figuring this out. Manuel in his video, which I'm sure you've all watched, and his really pretty studio. He's got a really nice garage. He's got all this nice and neat, but he doesn't actually show you how to do that. And I'm going to show you every step of the way. So here's the next thing we're going to do. I got the bracket.